Welcome to our second of 3 What Would You Write For events. For those who don't know me, I know I have some of my students here. I'm Erin McLaughlin. I'm one of the faculty members here in the University Writing Program. I'm joined by, do you want to say?
Sure. I'm Michelle Flive. I'm also a faculty here in the University Writing Program.
And our topic for tonight's event is Rhetoric and Education and Literacy Advocacy. As a reminder, in case you weren't aware, we do have one more of these What Would You Write For events tomorrow. This is a pilot series that we're offering for the first time this semester. Tomorrow's event is from 4:30 to 5:40 p.m. in this room. And it is on the topic of rhetoric and human rights advocacy. So if you're able to join us for that, we would love to see you there as well.
And we would like to take a minute to thank Mr. Earl Linehan and Mrs. Dario Linehan and the College of Arts and Letters. They have generously provided us a grant to sponsor this event, Teaching Beyond the Classroom grant. So we just want to take a minute to say thank you for that.
Great. So we'll just take a second to introduce you to our 2 panelists who we didn't know when we invited them to be panelists that they actually have known each other for how long? Like 20 years?
Something like that.
Yeah, so that was an interesting coincidence. We may not have enough time to get through everything that we could talk about with the 2 of you this evening. But so I'm going to introduce you to Christopher Riley. Christopher Riley is a trial attorney who practices civil litigation in state and federal courts nationwide. He's also the president of the Penn Harris Madison Board of School Trustees. First elected in 2010, Mr. Riley has won 3 successive re-election bids. As board president, he has helped the school district reach top academic honors and receive nationwide recognition for student safety. He earned his law degree from the University of Notre Dame in 2001, his Master's of Arts degree in criminal justice from California State in 1998, and his Bachelor's of Arts in government from University of Redlands in 1996.
And I'm going to introduce us to Heidi Beidinger-Burnett. Heidi's an associate professor of the practice at the Eck Institute for Global Health at the University of Notre Dame. She has a master's of public health from the University of Illinois, Chicago, and a PhD in educational leadership and organizational analysis from Western Michigan University. She's developed a background in public health, policy, community-based research, and leadership. Her research is focused on public health and policy, most recently focusing on lead poisoning prevention, including the development of new technologies to screen home environments for lead, as well as development and implementation of new and local statewide policies. Heidi Beidinger co-founded the Notre Dame Lead Innovation Team and the St. Joseph County Lead Affinity Group, a community coalition. And she served on the St. Joseph County Board of Health for over 7 years, 3 of which she served as president. So we're very lucky to have both of these guests with us tonight. Yeah. Sure. You can go ahead.
I'll go first. Yeah. Okay. All right, so we're just going to work down our list of questions, and then we'll hopefully have some time at the end for some Q&A as well. So for starters, could each of you give us a brief introduction to your organization and the kind of educational or literacy advocacy work that you do?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. It's so nice to be here with you back at the alma mater. Thank you so much for coming. And Erin and Michelle, thank you also for the invitation. It's a great honor to be here and discuss these issues, especially with somebody I consider to be a dear friend and an intellectual mentor to me when it comes to persuasion, which is Heidi. So this is just a real honor for me. I have 2 jobs that I think are pertinent to tonight's conversation. My full-time job is I'm a trial attorney. And obviously, in that context, advocacy and persuasion is what people pay you to do on their behalf. There's a dispute. They have a point of view on the dispute, and it is your job to present their side of the dispute in a way that could persuade people to resolve the problem in their favor. The second job that I have is I'm a school board member, and in Indiana, school board positions are elected, and I've had the honor of being nominated by my colleagues on the school board for I think now 10 of my 14 years to serve as president of the school board. Penn Harris Madison happens to be one of Indiana's largest school districts, and it is obviously one of Indiana's highest academic achieving districts. I'm just curious, how many of you went to public school versus Catholic school? How about public school? Okay, and then Catholic school? Okay, very good, very good. So those of you who come from a public school perspective will know that there are things that public schools have to do that Catholic schools don't have to do. And some of those things, as the night progresses, I'll talk to you about. But some of those things really, unfortunately, are kind of under attack as partisan politics has seeped into the administration of public education. And in that capacity, as a school board member, and certainly as the president of the school board, I've had to use every skill I have just to maintain what we have in terms of delivering a quality public education that is free and fair. Those are our constitutional requirements, free and fair for everybody. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means as the night progresses.
Good evening, everybody. Also equally happy to be here with my good friend Chris. When I think about education, literacy, and advocacy, this is something that has spanned my 30 plus years in my career. I spent my first 10, 13 years at the Centers for Disease Control, implementing surveillance programs, doing partner notification. I was at CDC in the very early years when HIV came on the scene. Those were some really tumultuous, dangerous times. And so when you think about the advocacy work that you had to do with a disease that was unknown, pretty much a death sentence, those were some tricky times. We were all learning on the job at that time. The second part of my career is that I had my own consulting firm. I had just moved back to the South Bend area, and there wasn't a lot happening in public health here in town. And so I started my own consulting firm and did grant writing. So again, because I was independent, using the advocacy, negotiation, persuasion skills were all essential to being successful. And it was also during that time, that's when I met Chris, and I was working at PHM myself, which we will definitely talk about the successes that we've had at PHM. And then the third place that I've been is now here at Notre Dame. This is my 11th year. And in my work here in community-based research and my work at the St. Joseph County Health Department, public health too is under attack. Not only public education, but public health is under attack. And I was president during the COVID years. Sounds like something from Star Wars. But it was during the COVID years that it was extremely difficult because so many people were angry, upset, everything that they didn't know. It's all the unknowns that people are fearful of. So again, the ability to be able to communicate with people in such a way that meets people where they are, not in a judgmental way, not in a condescending way, but to really meet people where they are so that you can have a conversation, so you can get past the fear. It's an art to be able to accomplish that. And believe me, when I first started doing it, not so much success, but I learned quickly about what works and what doesn't work. And so I'm sure we're going to talk more about that. Okay?
Yeah, that's actually an excellent segue into our next question, because we talk a lot about audience in our classes and the importance of knowing who you're speaking to and who you're writing to. So yeah, we were wondering, who are the people that you need to communicate with really effectively to keep things running smoothly, like in your day-to-day work?
So I'll take that one first. So who do we need to communicate with in our day-to-day work? So, we, in the bio section, my focus is on public health and policy right now, and in particular, lead poisoning prevention. So think about like who your stakeholders are, who is in that space, right? So we have parents we need to be talking to about their little kiddos who might be exposed to lead. right? Let me do some level setting. We all know what lead poisoning is. It's a naturally existing metal, heavy toxic metal. It is an incredibly useful thing, except that it has this problem of being incredibly toxic and devastating to the human body. It has no purpose to be inside of the body, and it affects every single organ: teeth, bones, skin, brain, every organ in the body. And it's horrible to little kiddos because it transcends the blood-brain barrier and goes into the brain and pushes out gray matter and actually destroys neural pathways. So you can imagine what that child's prognosis is. So who are the stakeholders? Moms and dads. We need to be talking to schools because they're the ones who are also seeing the little kiddos. We need to be talking to pediatricians, nurse practitioners, the people who run those organizations. Who else have we got? Community-based organizations that interact with moms and dads. How do we get everybody on the same page? And you guys, I've been working on this topic now since December of 2016, and we've not cracked it yet. We've made some incredible progress, but we've not cracked it. Now, one partner that you might not be thinking about right off the bat is, don't forget about the media. Make the media your friend. Ted Booker, who was the reporter for the South Bend Tribune in 2017, put our story on the front page of the paper 17 times. That is where we got our leg up. That's where we got our leg up. So knowing who the audience is and then adjusting it to what people need. And then there's another important group of people, and that's the policymakers. And what are they generally interested in? Re-election. They are very short-term thinkers, right? It's all short-term. What's going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months? They're always thinking about budget impact. That's what they'll say. What's the budget impact, Heidi? And I'm like, well, I don't know. What does it cost when a child loses some of their brain capacity to be successful in life, and that they have a higher likelihood to end up in prison? What's that worth? And then they move on to the next thing because they don't know how to answer those questions. And then that's where it's up to us to figure out, how do we bridge the gap? What language do I need to employ to make sure that I can communicate the severity of what's happening and get people onto our team and pass the right policies? And oh, by the way, it did take us 7 years, but we did get 2 very important policies passed. We had to do panel discussions. We had to come in front of the committees and so forth and do testimony and so forth in order to get those things passed. But it took us 7 years to get 2 policies passed with regard to lead poisoning prevention. Okay.
I'll answer the question from 2 different perspectives. First, as a trial attorney, then second, as an elected official. So as a trial attorney, who am I looking to persuade? Either a judge or a jury. Judges are a little bit more predictable in terms of how they're going to look at a dispute and resolve it. Judges are less influenced by nuance, they're less influenced by personality. They're pretty much, take a look at the facts, who do I believe, apply the law, give a judgment. Juries are completely different. Juries may listen or not listen to what I have to say based on the fact they don't like my tie, they don't like my suit, they don't like my Southern Californian accent. There is something about me they may not like. The practice of law has something that's really helpful for attorneys who try cases, especially in federal court. The names of jurors who could potentially preside over your trial is released to the attorneys about a week or so before the trial begins. In that week, I'm microdiving. Everybody on staff at my law firm is microdiving. I want to know, where are these jurors, where do they go to church? Do they have kids? What are they interested in? Where do they get their news? I need to know all of that stuff, because when I go to hone a message to them, I need to know whether it's a message that's going to resonate based on the prism formed by their own life experiences. So that's kind of it's a big undertaking. The most helpful thing in that is truth. Never forget, truth is your ally even when the truth can hurt you. I'll give you an example of a jury that I had not too long ago. I had some witnesses who basically told the same story, but certainly when it came to the essential elements of the case, they told the same story. But they all had details differently. Well, if you're the other attorney, what are you going to argue about my witnesses? You can't believe a single one of them. They got this detail different, they got this detail, got that detail. They're all different. Throw out their testimony. I happen to know, because I did my research, that 3 of my jurors were very, very devout Christians, as am I. And so when the other attorney made that argument, I came back up in my closing and I said, I hope you don't believe that argument because it's been tried before. Who were the witnesses who had different details wrong but essentially said the same thing? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And it worked because I knew my audience. And there was a juror who came up to me when trials are over, jurors have a limited opportunity to interact with the attorneys. A juror came up to me and said, I was really glad that you said that because I was wondering how you were going to explain those inconsistencies. So you've got to know your audience and you've got to know the prism through which they see life, because that's going to form the basis for how they decide what you're trying to persuade them. The other prism that I would talk to you through is that of being an elected official. And all I can tell you is certainly know your audience when you're advocating your positions, but in the end, your commitment to your positions and your knowledge of your positions is ultimately what is going to persuade people. Embrace the truth, even when the truth hurts you. There may be things about your position that are inconsistent, or there might be good counter arguments to your position, but embrace them and explain them. And when you do that with the audience, knowing the audience, you're far more likely to be successful. I had when I was a newly minted attorney, I just graduated from here. And the joke back then was, were law school students actually Notre Dame students? Yes, we were. We may have lived off campus, but whatever. We were Notre Dame students. I had just graduated from here. I just passed the bar, just got a job at one of Indiana's largest, most prestigious law firms. And I was hired in there as a trial attorney. And my mentor, who was a very well-respected senior partner, came in my office one day and said, okay, you're a litigation attorney, a trial attorney. What's your job? I looked at the look of befuddlement on my face must have been profound, because I thought, what a silly question. My job is to win. And he said, no. Your job is to solve your client's problem. They have a problem, and they're paying you to solve it. And the way that you solve it is through persuasion. Don't get caught up in, I have to win, I have to lose, because that's when the gravity of the situation gets lost and the problems don't get solved.
Okay. That also leads really well into this question. You've touched on this a little bit, but we'd love to hear maybe another example of a project or topic that was really important to your advocacy work that you needed to change certain people's minds about. How did you work to convince them?
How much time do you guys have tonight? Oh, gosh. I will tell you, I grew up in Southern California, and where I grew up, diversity, equity, and inclusion weren't merely aspirations, they were expectations. I would say at least a plurality, if not a majority, of my friends were minority, and at least 1 in 10 was gay. That's the life experience that I come to the table with. In the last 4 or 5 years, somehow or another, in my view, very unfortunately, diversity, equity, and inclusion came under attack in public education. It was no longer a situation where programs that promoted DEI were favored, they were under attack. With that comes really rocking the hopes and aspirations of a lot of kids who kind of need some help. And even worse, at times, is very hurtful. As the president of the school corporation, my job was to make sure that the programs that we had that supported marginalized people stayed in place. We received about 4 or 5 years ago during COVID, which it was at the worst time imaginable if you're in public policy, but we had received a 36-page dossier from alumni from our public school, basically outlining details of hate that they had experienced, either as a minority, as a gay, as trans, as a Jew, as a Muslim, that went unaddressed. And so now we have a problem, and some of these students you see had graduated in 1998. Can you imagine carrying that degree of hurt with you, that you graduated from a high school that did nothing about the fact that you were discriminated against for reasons that you shouldn't have been? So we had to act, and persuading the other school board members to act was a very difficult thing to do, especially at the time, because DEI has come under attack politically. And I'm sorry that it has, but people who are marginalized, people who are hurting, people who maybe just need a leg up. You know the difference between equity and equality, right? Could somebody give me just a real quick definition of it? Equality means...
You got a hand over here.
Yep, yes sir.
Equality is everyone getting the same thing. Equity is everyone getting what they need.
Very close. That is very, very close. Equality is everybody getting basically the same opportunity. Equity is giving people who don't have the same opportunity the opportunity that they need. That came under attack, and that was really upsetting to me. How do we go about persuading people on this particular issue? Guys, sometimes progress is measured in inches and not miles. And you have to understand that in advocacy, that you're not going to get everything that you want. But ultimately, I was able to make the case to the other school board members and to the public who wanted to know why we were acting on this, that we can't leave kids behind. I mean, we had an instance described in there where a kid was just running for student body president who happened to be Jewish. Vote for me, John Smith. And somebody had come along and draw a swastika on the campaign banner and said, "Go home, Jew." Nobody did anything about it. We couldn't let that be unaddressed. So it was a matter of systematically over time, including and using consensus building to try to get the other school board members to act, and then persuading the public at large that we had to act, because you know what? It's our constitutional duty to provide a free and fair public education to every student, no matter their background, no matter their sexual orientation, no matter their race, no matter their religion. It took time, but ultimately, inches, not miles, we were able to get it done.
I love that story. My entire career has been about negotiation and persuasion. My time in public health, public education, and policy, it's always about challenging the status quo. When you do that, you're gonna upset folks, right? Because status quo is where people want to be. It's comfortable, it's safe. I know what to expect. So in 2008, I wrote a grant for PHM. That's what I was doing when I had my own consulting firm. I was writing grants for school corporations, and I wrote a grant for $1.5 million for PHM School Corporation, and then I went to PHM to administer that grant. And the whole point of that grant was to say, here's a huge high schools all over the United States, and so many kids are falling through the cracks. How do we take a large high school, break it down into smaller components so that every child is known well by at least one adult? That was the mission. And then $1.5 million. In the first 8 weeks, the assistant superintendent sits me down and she's going over what we've been doing for the last 8 weeks. And she goes, you know, Heidi, you're gonna have to slow the roll a little bit. She's like, you're rocking the boat too much, too fast. And I'm like, listen, we only got 5 years, $1.5 million, that's not that much. We gotta chop. We gotta get this thing going. And oh, by the way, the graduation rate at that time, though it's a building of almost 4,000 kids, was 74%. So 1 out of 4 kids were dropping out. 1 out of 4. But you asked anybody at PHM, and they would have told you, oh, we have a 98% graduation rate. That was the perception. We're high achieving. Everybody graduates from here. So going back to my conversation with the assistant superintendent, she's like, you need to slow your roll. And I'm like, man, I don't even know how to do that. It's like not even in my DNA. She says, well, listen, the superintendent asked me to fire you. And I was like, God damn, in 8 weeks? I'm like, I'm just getting started. And I said, seriously, Nancy, if this is a personality thing and it's not gonna work out. And I said, I think I just need more time with him. And you guys, that now is what, 14, 15, 16 years ago? What I did not know then, but what I do know now about it and how I can talk about it is that I had to build relationships. That's at the center of this. Once I understand your values and what's important to you, and you have an opportunity to hear from me and what's important to me, we now have shared values. That is the single most powerful thing that you can do in terms of advocacy work and persuasion, is building that relationship and finding out those shared values. Would you believe it that the superintendent and I actually traveled to the national conference for that grant twice and had a great time, and he and I have a fantastic working relationship now. We, during those 5 years, we had approximately 178 teachers that we needed to bring along on this journey. That's not easy. They've been in the same classroom for 20 years, doing the same thing for 20 years, and they're like, and now you're asking me to do something. And by the way, who the hell are you? Right? So you can see all these hurdles that were in the way, but what I learned was it was about building relationships. So next thing I knew, I was inside of people's classrooms. Wow, I didn't know that's what you taught. I can hear the kids, they're excited when they're walking out of your classroom. Building the relationships. There's a lot more to tell you about what we did during those 5 years. But after 5 years, we took that graduation rate from 74% to 96.1%. Think about that. In 5 years, you hear how everybody is chewing up public education in the news, right? We hear it all the time now. Public education sucks. Teachers don't know what they're doing. It's horseshit. We need to ask the teachers what they're doing and do more of it and support what it is that they're doing, because they do know how to do it. We know how to do it. We need to get out of the way of the teachers and let them do what they need to do. But we have to, at the center of all of this, build the relationships, find out what your shared values are, and build on that. That's the most important thing in terms of getting to advocacy and persuasion.
And I love that story. But it's a great example of the change that you occasioned resulted in graduation results going from the 70s up to the mid 90s, but you created a structure that outlasted you.
Yeah.
Because now it was at 96%, I think, when you went to Notre Dame. It's now at 98%. It is the structure that she created is something that is continuing to improve, but it's not something that happened overnight. It's something that took a long time to develop, and it only developed incrementally because of those relationships.
Let me just add to that. What we created, the infrastructure that we created, there were two things. One is kind of the structural thing around how do we organize kids. So we had a freshman academy, and then we had academic academies so that they were named, right? So we had like Health and Human Services, and there were 3 other ones as well that were for the sophomore to the seniors. And so then kids were now aligned with what they were interested in. It's amazing what happens when you start taking classes that you actually are interested in, right? Engagement goes through the roof, and that's what we were seeing. The other really important thing that we did during that time was get rid of the barriers to the higher level courses. When I started, there were 4 sections of Honors English 9. When I left, there were 12. The department heads said, we can't do this. We're going to water everything down. Don't you understand what's happening? I'm like, yeah, we'll see what happens. We have more kids who are interested, more kids who are succeeding. The grades didn't drop because kids rise to the occasion. They want to be challenged. And that's what we did. And it was an amazing experience. And the fact that it's still there, it's amazing. And all 3 children, all of my kids graduated from there as well. So awesome.
I don't know if you want to dig deeper, and because you said you could talk about that all day, and so if you wanted to talk a little bit about the proposal process and that, but I'm sure there's plenty of other examples that you could that you want to dig into. But one of the things a lot of our students do in their classes, a genre that they work with, is proposal and proposal writing. So we were hoping that you could tell us a little bit about a time that you made a proposal per se, or maybe an idea you wanted someone to consider an action or policy, and kind of how you approached it, and any of the obstacles you encountered and kind of how you handled it.
Okay. So I have been writing grants since my CDC days. So I've got 25 plus years of writing proposals and grants. And when I had my own consulting firm, was really quite successful at it. The thing with proposals is that you'll see workshops and so forth, and you'll get pointers and a general framework. But the truth of the matter is, the way to learn proposal writing is to just do the proposal writing. And it's hard. It's really hard. There are detailed instructions. This is the mundane part of it, you guys. This is really, this is not the exciting part of proposal writing. But they give out instructions, and honest to God, the reviewers are looking for your mistakes. So read the instructions. If it says to do that, that's what you do. And you don't, this is not creative writing time. There's a blueprint. You follow the blueprint, and you document that. If you don't know the answer to something, you call up the project officer. I'm reading the instructions, I don't get this. They tell you what to do, you put it in. And it's that straightforward. If I think about a time when I wrote a proposal and I wasn't sure about how people were going to receive it, if we go back to the PHM example, writing that grant for $1.5 million, there were plenty of people around the table who were like, we're gonna do what? All right, why don't you write it? We'll see if we get it. And then we did. And then it was like, well, how are we going to implement that with so many naysayers, people who don't really want to be doing this? And then, of course, it goes to that relationship building part. If I could just switch to the lead poisoning work that I do. Currently, I mentioned that we had 2 policies that we were working on. Indiana had been out of compliance with CDC's guidelines around childhood testing. So actually testing little kiddos, we're way behind. We're only testing 10% of all the kids that need to be tested. And then we don't offer case management to kiddos who are in fact lead poisoned. And we haven't met the guidelines in like 25 years or something like that. So we got to work on that in 2017, and then it took us 7 years to get those laws passed. And I can now say, thankfully, that we are now in compliance with CDC's guidelines, although CDC is now being dismantled. And oh, by the way, yesterday, the lead prevention program was dismantled yesterday at the Centers for Disease Control, which is going to really impact what we do with kiddos who are lead poisoned in the United States. But in terms of getting those 2 policies passed, you have to have patience, you have to have passion, you can't give up. Just because you don't get it through the session this time doesn't mean you won't get it through the session the next time. And then there are concessions to be made, right? Probably the first year we submitted the gold standard. We want everything right out of the gate, and then you realize you're gonna get nothing, right? So you come back to the drawing board. What can we tweak? What can we let go of? What will satisfy whatever it is that's holding somebody up? And then you make those tweaks. Go out to coffee, go have a beer, go have a glass of wine, whatever you need to do to be able to build relationships with people to find out, how do we get this thing passed? And then get those people on board, get them to take ownership of the proposal, have them read it, have them give you feedback, give you input. And then, you know what also happens at the same time? They're using their language that they use with their circles, which is really important. So I have my language, right? But if I take a legislator out and I ask him to review it and give me feedback, now he's including his language, which is going to be recognizable by his colleagues. So there's lots of strategies in terms of like the proposal writing, but number one, just get in and do it. And it's not creative writing. Follow the instructions. Answer the questions.
Legal writing is not creative writing either. I think legal writing is the diametric opposite of creative writing. I've never written any proposals for grants or anything like that. Writing is something that I do regularly because judges are moved to act when you file a motion. Somebody said it, I heard somebody say it. So a judge can't act until you move the judge to act. You move the judge to act by writing up a motion. And so I do that regularly. So that, in a sense, is requesting somebody to do something and requesting them to grant relief. Well, the most important thing that I can ever express to you, if in the context of advocacy, is there are going to be strong points to your case and there are going to be weak points to your case. From the perspective of an attorney who's representing a client in a dispute, my client, whoever that may be, is not going to be faultless. My client will have done something profoundly stupid. That's just reality. Because if my client were faultless, we wouldn't have a dispute, right? My client did something that was not advised, and so now we have a dispute. You've got to own the truth, and you got to own up to the truth, and you've got to embrace it, and you've got to be able to explain it. Because the last thing you want to do is present a proposal or a motion that only tells half the story. Because while some things may be dismissed on technical failures, you never want to be dismissed on a credibility failure. Always keep your credibility by telling both sides, just explaining your client's own position. That's from the attorney perspective. Switching back over to the elected official perspective, I had made a deal with the superintendent. And my deal was, and I'm just going to put it in the language that he and I have, I will deal with the school board, 7 of us total. You deal with the other 7 billion people on earth, and I'm not sure who has the shittier job. Sometimes I think I do, but that means I have to build a consensus with the other school board members. I think probably our worst moment in some respects was our shining moment in terms of 7 people who profoundly disagreed, coming together and drafting policy during unprecedented times. COVID was unprecedented. Do you guys remember, what was your high school experience like? Was it masked one day, unmasked the next day, virtual one day, in person the next day? Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. You guys know what I'm talking about. There was no recipe book. It's not like we could pull a book off the shelf and turn to page 50 and this is what you do when a global pandemic occurs. We had to make up policy on the fly, which meant that you had to have 7 people who are duly elected, who have different opinions, come together and form a consensus on what to do. That took a lot of negotiation. And I think Heidi mentioned it. coming to understand where the other person's coming from. Set the principle, set what are you trying to achieve as a group, and then understand where everybody's coming from and communicate, which really helped us to get through an unprecedented period of time. And all of the votes that we had up until the very end, when a couple school board members just kind of went off on their own, what we had up until that point was a series of unanimous votes. It was difficult. It was, at times, it was anguishing. But we got through it together. We got through it with unanimous votes. We set the policy through really forming a strong consensus that was built on relationships.
What's something surprising or unexpected you've learned in your community advocacy work that you think is worth sharing with the future community advocates in this room today?
You want to go first? Well, I guess from the vantage point of a 53-year-old man sitting here and telling you, based on my own life experience, my own professional experience, the thing that surprises me the most is that today's assumptions are tomorrow's bygones. I gave you an example based on DEI, like where I grew up. Any other Californians in the room, by the way? Right on. I give you an example based on DEI. My assumption coming to the table is everybody's going to share that value of wanting to make sure that there is equity for everybody. That was an assumption. I have learned through experience that assumptions that you bring to the table may be bygones tomorrow. In other words, that things change, and they're going to change rapidly, and you have to adjust with it. And in your own advocacy practice, whatever that may be, you have to understand that you have to be adaptable. Not that you lose your principles, but that you adapt to new methods of communicating your principles, because never rest on the assumption that you had yesterday. That assumption may be challenged or challengeable today.
I think I'm going to play off of what, continue off of what Chris is talking about. This whole thing about what you thought what's important yesterday may not be important tomorrow, right? Or we make assumptions about other folks. So for instance, in my work with public health, we would all generally agree that infant mortality is something that we want to help solve, right? We don't want babies dying in the hospital, right? Maternal mortality, also something I think we would want, right? We don't want moms dying in the hospital when they're giving birth, right? And yet, Indiana has one of the worst infant mortality rates and the worst maternal mortality rates in the United States. There are 92 counties in the state of Indiana, and nearly a third of them do not have a hospital where somebody can go deliver a baby. Well, how the heck are you going to help infant mortality and maternal mortality if we don't have places where people can go and deliver and get care? Right? So you see the disconnect. You have to invest in the structure if you're going to improve these outcomes. And I made the assumption that everybody cares about those things, but they don't. That's hard. How do you work in that system, right? Just like I just said that CDC or the administration has eliminated the lead prevention program at the CDC. That's a new day for us. That means our state health departments and our local health departments, their funding is going to disappear now for lead prevention work. So that means literally we have to change the way that we're doing everything. And what's that going to look like? So you talk about adaptability, flexibility, right? Ingenuity. And in my leadership training, and I truly do believe this, and that is, in crisis, there's opportunity. In crisis, there's opportunity. I wholeheartedly believe that. We will get through this. We will come out the other side, and we will have a better program for lead prevention for kiddos. We will be dealing with infant mortality. We will deal with maternal mortality. It's going to be a rough road during the next 3 to 4 years, but it will be better. And it's going to be better because I know of the people who are going to be working on that, but also because of you guys. You're the next generation of leaders. You're going to demand this from your legislators, from your politicians. You're not going to sit by and let people who are otherwise healthy people die from childbirth. This is ludicrous in the United States in the year 2025. But that's why educating you guys and giving you what you need to go out into the world and to make those differences. That's what we're counting on. We want to turn that baton over. So reach out to us. You want to know more about something? Then contact us. Have those conversations. Be ready, because we need you to be ready when you graduate. I know you guys are mostly freshmen. All right, so you got a little buffer. But there are going to be lots of things that you guys are going to be working on, right? You're interacting with you'll be interacting with the local community, doing service projects or experiential learning, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to be firsthand seeing it up close. When you have questions, ask us. We want you to be ready when you graduate.
Yeah, so we actually just have one more question for you, and then there'll be time to ask questions, and I hope you all have questions. But one thing we talk a lot about in writing and rhetoric courses is the importance of context and the situation and rhetorical action. So what are some of the ways that the current cultural and political context impacts the work that you continue to do for education and literacy in our community? And I think that speaks to a little bit of what you were getting at earlier, but yeah.
So if I'm hearing the question, so sorry, say it one more time.
Yeah. What are some of the ways that the current cultural and political context impacts the work you continue to do for education and literacy in our community?
Yeah, so here's the thing, is that, I have big ideas and hopes and aspirations about what could be in Indiana. We should be a healthier state, for sure. And why is that? Why aren't we there? Competing priorities, people say we need to spend money over here, not over here, et cetera. We can go in, that's a whole lecture in and of itself. The political climate right now is not allowing me to address those big issues. So right now, I'm having to take a step back. And this doesn't feel good. This isn't natural, right? Because I'm used to being out there. I have relationship with the mayors, with state legislators, with senators, and so forth. And so I am out there. I'm now taking steps backward, and I'm looking, what can I do just locally right now, and in a micro way? So I'm thinking of the lead poisoning prevention work that I do. Now it's about, I'm actually talking to moms about testing their homes for lead. Pregnant moms, let's make sure your home is lead safe before baby comes home. I'm still making an impact. I'm connecting